Good morning and welcome to the April meeting of Corporate Governance and Audit. My name's Councillor John Taylor. I'm the chair of the committee. I'll start by asking members of the committee to just introduce themselves, and officers I'll ask to introduce themselves when they join to speak. So I can start at the left, Chris.
Good morning, I'm Chris Jones. I'm the independent member of the committee.
Hi, I'm Councillor James Homewood, a member of the committee.
Councillor Imran Safdar, I'm a member of the committee.
Councillor Kaspanek.
Councillor Jane Ryler from Home Valley South.
And Councillor Angela Sewell from Gurkha Ward.
Thank you very much. As I say, I'll ask officers to introduce themselves as we reach that. So, agenda item 2. Sorry, apologies. So, have we received any apologies?
We've received apologies from Councillor Armour and Councillor Holt.
Thank you.
Chair, just so you know, we can't turn our microphones off. They're just on. Tried.
Right. Well, we'll continue, and hopefully they'll be able to resolve that, and hopefully they can pick up people who are speaking from the microphone. So agenda item 2 is minutes of the previous meeting of the 7th of March. Are members content with the minutes, or are there any matters they wish to raise from the minutes? Are we happy to accept those as a accurate record of the meeting? Okay, thank you. Agenda item 3, declaration of interest. If any members have any matters on the agenda for which they need to declare an interest, could they please do so now and fill in the necessary form that's enclosed with the papers and hand it to Nicola at the end of the meeting, please. Are there any? I'm seeing blank faces, so I'll assume that is a no. Agenda item 4, admission of the public. This is a meeting that is taking place in public, and members of the public would be welcome to attend if they wish to. Agenda item 5 is deputations and petitions. Have we received any?
None received, Chair.
Thank you. Agenda item 6, public question time.
None received, Chair.
Thank you. So we're straight on to agenda item 7, which is council meetings. And I think, Lee, are you taking this one? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm Lee Webb, Head of Governance, and I'm here with this report today, just that sets out the council date meetings for the next municipal year. Members will be aware that we came previously with a report. There's also been a separate report that requested an additional meeting in April, which obviously took place this week. So this report, as I say, is for the year 25-26. The dates are set out on page 2 of the report. I think things to just highlight are the budget meeting, which has been held in February over the past few years, has now reverted. It's been held in March over the past few years. It's now reverted back to February, which allows for a later meeting, which is scheduled for the 11th of March. The 11th of March date is there, obviously, and the report refers to the pre-election period for next year, which is going to commence on the 12th of March, and that is probably slightly earlier than it would normally. But obviously, we'll just have an all-out elections. There's a lot of, 69 seats up for grabs. A lot of nomination papers to process for elections. So that's why the pre-election period starts then. So as I say, the dates are set out there, and it's for members to make a recommendation to full council, and it'll go to the actual AGM meeting for final approval. Thank you.
Thanks, Lee. Do members have any questions? Kath?
A comment, because I'm pleased that we've got somewhere. Having raised it about 3 years in a row. So it can be done. I'm still not convinced why it can't be in the pre-election period, because we always used to be able to, and suddenly that's no longer seems to be no longer the case. I'm happy with this, but I just want to know the answer to that question.
Lee?
Yeah, I think in terms of the pre-election period, you're correct that there's nothing statutorily that says it can't happen, but practically, and as I say, I've not worked here when I think you may have had them in pre-election going back a few years, I don't know. But I mean, I think the reasoning is obviously in terms of structuring a meeting during pre-election period, it's a little bit more difficult in terms of the items that are able to be discussed, how things are reported. Similar with public questions, a lot of the time, and I think it's quite common, you get candidates wanting to put questions. It's kind of difficult, but not impossible to manage, and I just think that's been the way it's been done. Is it's been avoided in Kirklees in recent years, and I think that's the answer.
No. No. Okay. Do any other members have?
We've got the extra meeting that I thought we should.
Thank you. Are members happy that we recommend this report to the annual council in May? Okay, thank you very much. So thank you. I think we're now going to move to the next agenda item, which is the tenants allocation report. And welcome, Janet, you timed that perfectly. We're just giving officers a moment to prepare to present their report. Yeah, just a reminder that if we are speaking, make sure we put our microphones on, because the people that are listening, so that they won't have heard some of what you just said, Kath, to be honest. But I think we have said it before, haven't we? So. Yeah. Well, welcome to the meeting, Janet Graham. If before starting you just introduce yourselves, both for the benefit of the members of the committee and anybody that's watching on the stream. But yeah, fine.
Thank you. Hello, I'm Janet Sharp and I'm the Interim Service Director for Homes and Neighbourhoods.
Good morning, I'm Graham Sykes, Housing Services Strategic Manager.
Okay, I mean, it's over to you guys now to present your report.
Right. What I would like to do this morning, if this is okay with yourselves, is just provide a brief overview of the housing tenancy allocations audit. We also have here Martin from the audit team, who's been incredibly helpful in conducting quite a thorough audit on this for us, and hopefully that is set out clearly in the report, and our response to that audit. So I will give just an overview. There may well be some detailed questions, and Graham along here, who was formed part of that audit when it was undertaken, and also the Homes and Neighbourhoods response to the recommendations and the completion of those actions. You can provide some further information. So in terms of the audit that was undertaken, this was around tenancy allocations, and the scope as set out in 1.2 of the report is around, it was included in the 24-25 audit plan, and that was around compliance with the allocations policy in respect of successions, introductory tenancies, choice-based lettings, transfers, mutual exchanges, and management arrangements. It was about the effectiveness and the efficiency of service performance and controls. This is obviously a critical area for the council in terms of making sure it is compliant with its own allocations policy. The reasons for any discretionary changes in banding and how that is tested, and that there is clear documented audit trail on decisions that are taking place with regarding to investigations. And this is why it's really important, you know, for Kirklees, but also for any council, to regularly review how it is managing allocations, and particularly in a time when we know there is huge demand for social housing, and that we're allocating fairly, effectively, and also taking into account individual circumstances as part of the management of that policy. So within 1.2 it also goes through the scope of what was included and also, you know, the progress that has been made from that. And the audit, as set out in 1.6, made findings in 4 areas where there was limited assurance. And that was particularly around succession, introductory tenders, mutual exchange and management lets, but also substantial assurance in a number of areas, you know, particularly for choice-based lettings, and also some limited assurance areas. So what we have included in the report is, you know, a huge amount of work has taken place by the council, by the housing management services and other council services in the council who obviously support the management and effectiveness of our allocations policy, to actually look at the recommendations and also to address some of the issues that came from the audit. And these are set out in section 2. So as you'll say, that there are, so all of the actions that we needed to take to review processes, review procedures, to make sure we've got really focused performance metrics in place for the management of the allocations policy, you know, that we have responded to, and hopefully in the report and picking up previous concerns from this committee about can we understand when things were done and how they were done, hopefully will provide the committee with some assurance. There are a number of the recommendations that are linked with our introduction of the new housing management CX system. The current system that we operate in homes and neighbourhoods has been in place for a very, very long time. and as you will know as a committee, is that it has taken a number of years to bring forward a new housing management system that's much more robust, exactly what we need to do to deliver efficient services. And that will be coming on stream by the end of September. So we should start to see from September, you know, increased performance and effectiveness and utilisation of our resources into managing the service moving forward. So there are a number of recommendations that we have completed the audit actions in the areas where we should and have done, but we have also will need to pick up some of those recommendations which we will need to review when the new CX system goes live. And if, as that goes live, any members of the committee wish to come and have a look at the system and how it will operate, then I'm sure that officers will be only too happy to make that available to see how we're going to manage the service differently. So that is recommendation 4, 2.7, in terms of how we log and record, and also 2.8, in terms of response 5.1, 5.2, and also in recommendation 12, identified as 2.15 paragraph, in terms of how we will continue review, including training and including to review that as part of the CX system, and also in paragraph 2.18, recommendation 15, you know, in terms of what we will do once we've got the new CX system in place. So I'm hopefully that provides a full review. Obviously, as a committee, we've been through, you know, quite a considerable, obviously, audit, and I really want to say thank you to the audit for being undertaken. I think it's a really valuable piece of work that's been undertaken and really robust. That's enabled us to prepare a very, very detailed action plan for the delivery, and hopefully the summary report that has come here today, hopefully you can feel assured that the actions we have taken to resolve the recommendations, we have tracked them seriously, we have done robust pieces of work by officers to complete those actions, but also that the audit recognises that some of those actions will need to maybe come back to committee once the CX system is in place, and you can be assured that we've closed off all the actions from that audit. I have nothing further to say. Happy to pick up any questions, and I'm sure that Graham, who was obviously integral into this huge piece of work that's been undertaken, may be able to answer some of the more detailed questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Janet. I'll open it to members, but I think one of the things that's worth noting is this audit was actually requested by yourselves in the first place, wasn't it? 'Cause, and it's great to see that, you know, that positive, we welcome internal audit coming in and helping us identify what issues are and resolve those. But I'll open it to committee now.
Shows the value of internal audit. Martin, well done. Well, it does, and maybe the council needs to reflect on that, and how using internal audit can improve council services. The stunning thing is there were 23 recommendations, which I suppose leads me, rightly or wrongly, to think that it wasn't what was going on wasn't as efficient and as accurate as it should be, and so that has been revealed, and it's very clear that the service is taking the recommendation very seriously and taking a prompt action to put in the recommendations into place. All that is very positive. So I've just a couple of things really. This new system, I suppose it's been checked off with other providers that they use it, and yeah, you know, because tech systems can be, yeah. But if it's been used, tried and tested by others, then that answers my question, really.
We are speaking to other landlords that use the CX system. There is a degree of tailoring within the CX system to sit with our process and policy within Kirklees. So alongside, and the system's not the be-all and end-all, the system helps us do the job that we need to do.
Yeah.
As part of this, and as part of this audit, we've developed a number of standard operating procedures. So we now have a rule book of procedures which officers can follow, which complements what they can see on the systems. So it all comes together.
Yeah. It should, from what is written here, should be a huge benefit and help all the efficiencies and effectiveness of the system that you know, everybody's looking for. So the second question is really, I suppose, a comment, really. New tech systems are hugely expensive, and local government and housing revenue account isn't a flush with the money to spend. So is there any mileage in approaching government who are keen for tech solutions to make for efficiencies and effectiveness and all the rest of it, to fund these things? You see, I'm always hopeful.
Yes. I think certainly we considered that. You know, we have seen a number of statements around
Yeah,
you know,
so have I.
technology advances, and I think you know officers have looked to see how information or funding could help and support us in this. I think unfortunately we haven't been able to access for this system
Right.
any additional light funding. This system is obviously funded mainly obviously from the council's housing revenue account, given its housing management system. But what we are doing as part of the 30-year HRA business plan is what there has been is in place is that there has been system issues. And so what you do in those situations, you manage stuff in a manual way to do it. You know, the robustness will have been there, but it won't have been there on a system where all the evidence base and all the actions and things like that are in one place. It'll have been here, there and everywhere. So by implementing a system with new technology, there will be some functions that will be able to be automated. There will be some things that will avoid us having to do other things. And also be able for staff to be able to support staff better to be deliver the services in terms of how they want to deliver the service as well, you know, and make it easier. Now that in itself should bring efficiencies through the future years of the housing revenue account business plan in terms of avoiding too many workarounds and actually enabling the system to help us to deliver efficient and effective services for our tenants. So what we will be doing is, you know, as an annual basis, is once post-implementation of CX, is be reviewing, you know, the effectiveness of that. As Graham has said, it's taken us longer to implement that system because we've had to be really honest about having discussed this with the officers who've been involved in the design process and also with our IT colleagues, is, you know, testing out some of our procedures, some of our policies, some of our practice that actually needed a refresh. And as Graham says, you know, huge amounts of work has been undertaken by lots of people supporting the implementation of this system. And also, we then should be able to see that practice can change. It can be probably more efficient, easier for staff to get the information that they need to be able to respond to our customers. And also we then in turn should be able to see those efficiencies come forward through the housing revenue account. That is not necessarily because that might mean that we then can have our officers doing the things that we know that we're not doing as well as we can, and to be focusing their attention on things rather than trying to work around manual processes.
No, that's really, really positive. And greater accountability, my last comment, if I can, Chair, which is where it's somewhere, it's one of the recommendations about sign-off and recommendation 12. And that seems to me part of the accountability for allocations. And when, as you said right at the outset, there's huge pressure on social housing, and people need to see that it's allocated fairly. And so having an accountability system through that, I think, is very important. So, but thank you. I think that's good progress.
Just before I bring Chris in, I was just going to add one thing to what you've said, Janet. So I kind of wear two hats here, really, because I sit on the Housing Improvement Board, and actually I've been the critical friend for the CX implementation as well. What CX will also help us do is improve the service we deliver to our tenants, and we're hoping that the do I get it right? The customer information surveys that we do, that's not the right word, but we check with our tenants every year about satisfaction level, and we're ambitious about improving those as well. And hopefully CX will help do that, because it enables us to provide the right information at the right time, won't it? So that's another benefit that's going to come out of this, albeit maybe not a financial one or reducing resources, but actually if we can deliver better for our tenants, that's got to be a great thing as well. Chris.
Yeah, thanks, Janet, for the report and for that introduction, and particularly for the last commentary. So I had a lot of questions about references to spreadsheets and emails and things that don't sound like the part of a modern system. I think those are the workarounds that you've just alluded to. But in the context of the report, ignoring what's coming, how has the report helped overall? And there's a lot of detail, a lot of recommendations, and sometimes we can get seduced into agreeing to recommendations, but we need to take a big picture view as well sometimes. So what's changed in lettings because of the report, and what's better? Because all I can see is a lot of actions that people have got extra work, really.
Thank you for the question, Chris. As Janet said in her opening presentation, this landed with us just at the right time, because we knew we had an issue in these areas. General housing allocation through our Choose and Move system runs very smoothly and has always come off really strongly with substantial assurance in previous audits. We wanted to make the most use out of this audit. So working with the finance officer that was appointed to the audit, we were able to look at these processes in great detail. That really supplemented our work around the development of those processes into the CX system. So at the moment, and as you correctly referenced, there are lots of workarounds with spreadsheets and email. So we're in a bit of an interim at the moment. When we move into CX, a lot of that will become automated. So that's where we'll see the efficiencies. For me, looking at this and some of the kind of the management controls that we're missing, our current systems didn't give us the reporting that we needed to give us that clarity on some of these tenancy allocation processes. So what we've done, and I think the biggest win for us, and its references in the report, is introduce the T-card system, where we know now exactly what cases that our housing management officers are dealing with, in conjunction with the income officers as well. That's kind of supplemented and feeded by some of the management information that we do have available. That is robust, but it's just pushing us in the right direction to when these processes are fully automated, and the reports that are generated through the CX are giving us the management information that we require at a senior level to have those assurances that properties are being allocated as we expect.
So I suppose my question was, are we allocating houses in a different way? Are we allocating them to different people? Are we doing it more quickly? What's the overall benefit? Because otherwise it's just process, isn't it? And process is important. It gives us assurance, but is anything different?
The benefits optimising council stock and has been able to see who's in our homes and at what stage of their tenancy they're at. One of the interesting things about this audit, excluding mutual exchange, is where we're looking at use and occupation accounts. Generally, those tenants don't want any contact with us, because it might mean that we're having to move them on to more suitable accommodation. So those are the cases that are probably most challenging for our staff to deal with. The very emotive. Somebody could have passed in the household, dealing with bereavement. Probably the last thing they want to deal with is us. So some of those cases, and some of them were historic, as described by the auditor, they've been brought to light, and now we can actively work and support the individuals, the residents left in those properties, to ensure that home's fit for purpose. So it's more of a win for the resident, the tenant.
Thanks, Chris.
I think if I could just add for that, I think what the system also will do is have that view of a customer, but also, making sure it will also help us facilitate more regular surveys with our customers, so that we're not waiting for an annual survey. We can have much greater interactions with our customers. And sometimes, to make sure, yes, we are compliant with our tenancy allocation like policies, but also we really truly understand the vulnerability of people living in our council housing here. And also sometimes if we haven't heard from someone may need our support. So this, along with other housing management changes, will enable us to really improve the quality of the services. The good thing about the CX as a project, there's been fantastic engagement with staff to bring about change. And that's really positive. But also, you know, the role that our tenant-led panel has input into this, and some tenants who've got involved, that's been invaluable to look at it from the eyes of the tenant as well as the eyes from officers as well. And I think that is, you know, that close relationship is really important as we redesign services in, you know, in future. And is obviously, you know, a key priority for the service. So this has been well. Alongside this, obviously, we also bring in real life system changes to the council's repair service with real time, and that will again provide us real time information. So officers can actually, you know, see actually what's happening in terms of the number of repairs that are being ordered and things like that. So it enables us to bring wholesale change to the delivery of housing management services, which together should improve our relationship with tenants, but also our effectiveness and efficiency in managing. And also things that are a real challenge for us at the moment, right? Too many empty properties that have been abandoned and things like that. So it'll also enable us to get a greater handle on some of those properties and how we can get them turned around and let much easier.
James, did you want to come in?
Just a couple of quick things. So just, you know, when you've mentioned automation with the system, are you just talking about, because when I read the recommendations, it still says things like, you know, dip test X, manager to review Y. So is the system just bringing everything together, doing the right reporting, flagging? It's not actually doing any of the actual work, if that makes sense, in terms of the reviews or saying this hasn't met a criteria. It's still relied on an individual to do that.
But I think the automation is that there is far too many spreadsheets and emails collating information, and then when you are then looking at case management, that becomes incredibly problematic and time-consuming for officers, and also frustration for tenants, you know, if you don't get back to them because you're busy collating information off different systems. So in this way, you know, having it in one place will be really efficient, effectiveness, but also then our ability to respond should be easier to do and to manage. There will be, as part of this, some things that there is manual input in. You know, that system should be able to bring about those changes. And some functions may well be able to be automated. But what we're not talking about is, you know, is large-scale automation of the service. This is about having a system that is easier for us to manage and our customers see the benefits of that. And we can deploy our resources much more effectively to deliver the services that we need to do and the improvements that we need to bring forward.
Thank you. And then the other thing I just wanted to ask was, so we've said, oh, you know, good audit, and you requested an audit. I'm just wondering, did you need an audit? As in, it sounds like you knew what the problems were and maybe knew what actions you needed to take. So I'm just wondering, you know, what process did you go through? So did you follow our risk process of saying, these are our risks, we've scored them as a high risk, we've got action plans, and that's what's triggered the audit? Or, because actually, you know, it's good what we've got here, but it actually feels like you kind of knew the answers to the questions in some respects, maybe? I don't know, maybe, or maybe not.
I think it is very good practice to have regular audits and value our audit process. And one of the things, you know, from our short time here being in Kirklees, is that, you know, there is some really robust process, some excellent audits that take place, and that gives us an independent assurance on whether, and so we might think so, but actually that is really valuable, and we need to build on that value as has been mentioned. And I think that's good, and I think, you know, so that, you know, we can get that sort of objective assurance. And also, as we mentioned, you know, there are other areas as well where we seek help and advice, and, you know, I only asked for help and advice from Audit on an issue last week with our audit colleagues. You know, because some of the areas, as you change services, you do want to, make sure that we are capturing the right information, they are efficient and effectiveness, and also, Kirklees is landlord to 22,000 properties. That is a huge stock, and also that regularly needs those checks to make sure we're doing the right things in the right way, and also, how we seek feedback from our customers, but also we're providing efficient services. And in audit is a key part of that, so that we don't get complacent and actually have regular checks and balances to make sure we're on the right track.
Okay. Oh, Kath?
Just one final thing. When you come back, which you've offered to do for the final, whatever it is, 4 or 5 recommendations after the system has been installed, would it be possible to also give us a feel of the improvements that have been made at that stage, so that we can see that there are benefits from this very significant change that you're making?
It is significant change, yes, for the service. Obviously, all the hard work's been undertaken by colleagues across Kirklees and obviously within homes and neighbourhoods on this project. And there is an offer that maybe when we do come back, we'll bring a report of things that have worked. There'll be some things that maybe haven't worked quite so well as you get with the teething problems of any new system. And also, I think there is an offer if any members of the committee, prior to that, want to have a look at the system, then we could actually, do a demonstration of what the functionality will enable us to do, if that would be helpful.
Just on that, if the committee's happy, if you'll leave it with me as chair, to get an appropriate timescale, because what we don't want to do is go in too quickly after implementation, because we won't have assessed the benefits then. So it probably is something that would be in 2026 realistically, rather than in 2025, because the implementation I think is September-ish time.
So it'll take a few more.
Yeah. So if the committee are happy, we'll capture it on the tracker, but leave that with me and we'll come back to that. But thank you, Graham and Janet, and please escape. Oh, you can. Thank you. If members are okay, we're going to move to the next agenda item. Oh, we need to formally note the report. So we're all comfortable with noting the report. Thank you. So the next agenda item is informing the audit risk assessment. I think, James, you're probably doing this one, aren't you?
Thank you, Chair. Hi, it's James Anderson, Head of Accountancy. This report is an annual one that we do every year to support the audit. So Grant Thornton furnishes with a list of questions, and they're a similar topic to previous years. So we've got general enquiries of management, fraud, laws and regulations, related parties, going concern, and accounting estimates. So it's an amalgamation really of people sort of dropping into the responses. Some of it's from accountancy colleagues, including myself. We also send some to Martin and the risk team, things like fraud, and also the head of legal is involved in the answers as well, and all so it gets signed off by the monitoring officer and section 151. So yeah, it just forms part of their initial audit inquiries, and they'll follow up things during the audit as normal. So if any questions, really, it's quite a long appendix where we go through all the questions and all the answers. So we'll go into those unless anyone wants to. Thank you.
Thanks for your brevity, James. I'll open it to members with any questions that anybody has.
Let it not be said that I never have a question. So it's very full and complete. However, we don't know what's missing. So were there anything when you were writing this that you thought, should I put that in? You know, where were the question marks? So the dividing line between, yes, that's important, I'm going to put it in, and no, I don't think it is.
It's a good question. I suppose if there could be, there is space for a conversation between the three parties involved, and it's a stage in the final accounts process. So a lot of these things, it depends on the topic, but we'd need to bring things into the accounts if they were appropriate. So some of the things, if they were in legal cases, for instance, we have to make a judgment on where they may sit, if there is something, whether it's a provision in accounting sense or a contingent liability. So we have to look at the issues. So we'll canvass it, and we'll have an internal working paper where we're looking at that, and then it's a bit of professional judgment as to what we do with it. Again, it's all about that final set of accounts. Equally then, we provide the information to GT, and that's the counterbalance of it.
Right.
They will have that source information and the working paper that builds it all up, and they'll ask questions of us and colleagues in legal and assurance as to wherever they see fit, really, where they see the risk. So there is space for those things, and you're right, it's some reference will be to working papers, but it's probably due to it not being a 90-page document. And
No, I don't want to see that. I just want to know that discussion has taken place and that there has been agreement between the three parties of where the line is drawn.
Yeah, it starts with me, and I send it out, and equally Sam and Kevin get sight of it as well. And fundamentally, at the end of it, we have various points in the accounts process and the audit process, and at the very end of it, audit will ask us for a final version. Has anything changed of some of these assumptions that say that the accounts aren't right at this point? So that right up to signing, where the process kind of continues on. So it does get plenty of oversight, both internally and externally.
Chris?
Just a couple of detailed questions, James, if I may. Section 21, which talks about fraud and corruption, it's got a list of roles that are deemed to be potentially high risk. As an outsider, and I make no comment on the professionalism of all your colleagues, I was a bit surprised to see roles involved in planning wasn't in there. Certainly the history of planning in local government generally has been, from time to time had some corruption elements attached to it. So I was a bit surprised they weren't on that list, but maybe there's a good reason for that. And secondly, over the page, there's a section on related party transactions and relationships. It depends a bit on the meaning of that, but the response is all about councillors, and I presume there's some similar process in place for senior officers who might, have related party transactions in some way or other. So I just thought that was missing, but I'm sure during the detail of the audit, colleagues will pick that up with if they need to.
I'll pick up the second verse, probably. I'll let Martin dip into the first. Not passing the book, obviously. You're right. Related parties is anyone who's related, and there could be transactions. So there will be a questionnaire that goes out internally to officers, and obviously it's more important for senior officers. It's decision making. It's a lot of procurement that would be the biggies there, because I suppose you're looking to be very transparent with any transactions that are happening between related parties, whether it be with an officer, a member. Again, it's power to do it, or equally it can be any form of procurement subsidiary. So there's a lot of I suppose audit interest in these areas. They're key because, perhaps not as much public sector, but you get into the private sector world and groups dealing with each other and trying to get profits, etc. in certain ways is a big thing, and it's back to transparency and the stakeholders of looking at the accounts, being able to see what I suppose the nuts and bolts of the transaction are. Is it window dressing, and is it doing things for a purpose, or is it actually it's quite a transparent transaction that's entirely within the normal course of business? I mean, that's taking it to a real end degree, but probably here it's about getting us having internal controls to be able to identify related parties and then to get them transparently put into the accounts. Does that kind of answer your related parties?
I just want to make sure we did it for officers as well as members, and the answer is yes, so that's fine.
It is across everybody. Martin.
Yeah, I think we've taken the view that we were reporting on the sort of most direct ones that where individuals could essentially deprive the council of overt cash, as those sort of fraud risk areas, treasury management being the most obvious one of those. I think it's a fair point that that corruption by planning officers is a well-known risk. Let's say it at that level. And we perhaps should have a chat with Greg and colleagues about whether they feel that is the type of thing they would want us to report. I mean, it's also true to say that procurement risk, there is a risk of fraud in procurement or again, corruption in procurement, which I guess it's very hard to codify as such. You've got to hope that the rest of your organisation's internal controls will restrict or prevent that through management. So I guess we feel that those are somewhat lower risk, but they are clearly there. And I think perhaps if the committee is content with that, we will reflect on the content in conversation with GT and reach a conclusion about whether we should make those observations. I think they are probably workable out by GT, but if they're expecting us to make those statements, then I think we possibly could have them in. Yeah, thank you. That's a very fair point.
Thanks, Martin. I think given the recent issue in Leeds, and of course Liverpool as well, there was the issues in Liverpool. It probably is one I certainly would hope to see on a risk register somewhere, and perhaps it is one for a discussion. But I think, Chris, thanks for picking that up. Members, any other questions on this agenda item? So are we happy to agree this document and for it to be formally submitted by the council to Grant Thornton? Oh, sorry, Greg, come in.
Thank you, Chair. Just to pick up firstly on a related parties point from our perspective, I think we've seen perhaps higher risk with council members in the past, because I think for the officers, when we look at the senior officers, they've been used to this level of scrutiny in their roles over their careers. So it's very much a high level of discipline around reporting their interests. Obviously with members, it may be they come and join being a member at different points in their career, different points in life, and they may not have had that discipline. It might not be necessarily intentional not to make those disclosures, but just they're not used to that kind of level of discipline required. I think we'll also say the controls really around the officer risk is that procurement angle in terms of related parties, and often there is a high level of scrutiny around controls around that. Whereas for members, it might just be that initial decision making in the groups, putting forward something they wish to do, and that may be where the interests, those pecuniary interests, haven't been disclosed. In terms of the planning risk, it's perhaps slightly further away from the direct financial statements that we audit. But from our perspective, if you believe there's a risk there as members of this committee, it may be something that goes further on the internal audit plan, and then we look at as part of our value for money work. But generally, as external auditors, our value for money work is at a higher level than your internal audit service and plan. Thank you.
Thanks, Greg. So just to committee again, are we content to agree the risk assessment document and for it to be formally submitted to Grant Thornton? We're comfortable with that? Take that as a yes. Thank you. Sorry. Move on to the next agenda item, which is the minimum reserve provision. I assume this is you again, James.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So, probably a bit of brief background. The report is at the request of CGAC for an explanatory paper in a previous meeting. So we've put this paper together. I have to talk you through the brief highlights, if that's okay. So the background, we go through 4 options, which provides the various methods for calculating MRP. We then look at the old calculation that we used, there's some new information around the new calculation that is now in place and will be used going forward. So within that section, we cover the review of the calculation, which is done by Link, and the details supporting that new calculation. On the back of that process, 6 alternatives were provided by Link, and we highlight our preferred one, so that's the shaded option 5 in the table, in 2.5. We then look at some comments on the key accounting principle of prudence, and make various notes on that. There's then a little bit of a timeline provided for members, which picks up in terms of approvals by Audit Committee and Cabinet and Council over the last couple of years. And then ultimately there's some financial implications of the new policy that are noted in section 3.6. And then in terms of the appendices, we've got the new MRP policy, which was bolstered anyway due to the changes in the regs, which is noted in section 2.18 on that. There's the previous MRP policy, and there's an edited version of the workings provided by Link at Appendix C, which will give you the MRP charges. So yes, over to questions. That's a brief outline of probably what's a very technical document.
Thanks, James. I'll open it to members.
I think it's really useful to have the clarity of the table in 2.5 because it makes it clear what the rationale behind the decision to adopt the approach was, and I think that's not been clear to all members in the last period. I think there's an interesting professional debate to be had, which we're not going to have now, about whether option 3 in terms of asset life method and what we've settled on, which is a kind of statistical anomaly in terms of the combined single weighted average life basis, which makes no relationship to asset life at all, really. It's just a kind of calculation, it seems to me, is the same thing, but I'm prepared, you know, it's been approved and it's much clearer now, so thank you for the clarity.
Thank you. Yeah, take your point and say it's you get lost in the maths when you start sort of picking through it. We feel we've got a reasonable methodology now, and it's been audited, and we hope it's clarified for members that little bit of missing information that everyone felt wasn't quite there to start with. Thank you.
First of all, thank you very much for such a clear explanation of MRP, which it might be useful for others to see if they wanted to, because I thought that was explained it very well. What we're not, it's a bit short-termism, it seems to me, is this approach. It's how do we get round not having to pay now, and we've put it off into future years. I mean, that's the problem with it. So the decision to take this approach to help breach the very, very big problem of funding is basically to say future years are going to have to pay. And it's not going to be evenly spread across the years is basically what we're saying. It's going to be the bulk of the payback is in the last few years. That's how it's working. And all right, 20 years' time, none of us will be here. So, well, probably won't, will we? So, but I do worry about pushing that can down the road and leaving a legacy of a considerable payback, because taking the benefit early on, like now. That's, I mean, I understand everything else. It's very clear. I suppose I'm sort of say fundamental. Is it the right, fair approach for future citizens that we do this? Anyway.
Probably the only thing to say is we review, budgets get looked at every year, and we will have to get the MRP budget in place. And if you take a longer term horizon, there's the reserves as well. So at the moment with the councils, it's really important for us to build back up our reserve levels and try and do it as prudently as possible. And yeah, you can't argue there's a short-term benefit to this, but I suppose that the two things against that is that we are aware of that benefit and we have that time span in front of us, so we can budget for that over a longer period. And when we get, I suppose hopefully, in ideal we'll get a more stable financial planning horizon and a longer-term settlement, which allows us to have that detail and have it in view over the MTFS, which will be a 5-year period. And equally, we can build our reserves up to accommodate the extras when it comes, which is, as you point out, a few years down the line. But I guess it allows us to look at the transformation journey in a more holistic sense of you can take that longer time frame, and this supports that process as well. So you're right, it's a longer term issue, and MRP is always a long term issue because debt's a long term, borrowing's a long term process with up to 50 years, and assets are long term assets, fixed assets if you like. So you are trying to marry that process, and you do take a long term view at its extremes. It just so happens that when we've gone and done this process, there was quite a chunk of a short-term gain that probably met the organisational needs at the time. So yes, we have to be mindful of it, and when we look at putting the budget together and those things, it is something that we look at, and we are always looking at reserve levels and that side, which dovetails in with this in essence. So, thank you.
Thanks, James. James, do you want to come in?
Yeah, I think that discussion sort of partly answered my question, but it was just on where that we kind of position it. So, in the financial implications section, it says 23-24, the saving of 6.7 million reduced the overspend. And I was just in my head, I was thinking, did we actually save anything? What did we save? Do you see what I mean? Is it a saving? It's a provision we didn't make. So it allowed us to provide more services or less, whatever, this year. But I'm not sure we saved anything. Maybe I'm misinterpreting it.
It's a reduced revenue charge. So you're right. And it's a saving against a budgeted revenue charge. So everyone's right on this one. But yeah, it's not.
I suppose I'm not have a problem with it. I just think that even though this is good, I still think it's really complicated if you don't understand it. And I think what we need to think about is for members, particularly if something's going to full council or even to this committee, what are we talking about in really simple terms? And I think if someone sees something, we save some money, think, oh, cracking. But actually, we haven't necessarily, it doesn't mean it in those terms. And I think it's just making how we get the right balance of how we can really simply articulate it. But I appreciate it's not simple. But yeah, I understand the point.
I think actually it shouldn't really be down to officers to articulate that. I think it's really down to the cabinet member that's presenting that report to explain it in a way that members will follow and understand, because it is very technical in nature. And actually, it is about saying what the decision that's been taken is to enable us to provide more services today, with a recognition that we need to provision for that later down the line, and we've done that because of the state of our finances today. And it's probably that level of explanation for members, because for a lot of members, if you tried to talk through this technical document, whether that was done by officers or by the cabinet member, I'm not sure they would follow it greatly. I don't know if anybody else wants to comment at all.
I agree with James. This is high technical and complicated stuff. I think some pre-briefings and some training along this would be very welcome.
I mean, the test will be, because it's minimum revenue provision, when it's, as it says in the report, when a provision is made above the MRP calculation. That will be the test. Because otherwise, as I said earlier, further down the line is quite a big impact on revenue.
Just on that, I think we have put in some additional provision in the budget.
This is the voluntary revenue provision reserve. So in a theoretical sense, the MRP stayed at the level, but we treated it as an overpayment, and so it went into that reserve instead of, because it was in a base budget anyway, it's almost it just moved it to a reserve, so you're effectively overpaying, which you can draw down to support a wider overspend should you require it. So it's yeah, we sort of, you're right, but we're both right. There is that difference between what the actual charge will be on this new methodology. We kept the budget in at the higher level, so it created a VRP reserve, which allowed us then access to draw that down to, as we would any other reserve, to be able to support an overspend position, if you like.
I mean, that's a good theory, is all I'm going to say. But when the budget is being determined, and there's always going to be pressures on budgets, my expectation will be that the minimum is what will be paid.
With the MRP budget, well, every year the budget will be reset, and you can reset it at, we've obviously got a calculation now that's established and in place, and any new borrowing drops on top of that and will be added to the balances that you've seen. So then, literally, you can take that position, and that's the base calculation, if you like. So it's only when you compare it to a prior budget that you
yeah, because those figures are going to go up as more borrowing. Anyway,
yeah,
I think that's more of a policy decision.
I think we've had the explanation. I think we need to note the report if members are content. And I agree with you, Kathy. This is a political policy decision, isn't it, about what level and how we set the budget, and that's for a different group rather than this group. But thank you, James, for the report. And if members are happy to note that, yep, okay. I'm going to move on to item 12. 11. I'm trying to get ahead. Greg, I think you're going to present this for us, aren't you?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think just from Grant Thornton's perspective on the last agenda item as well, this is one of our audit recommendations from last year's report, and I think it's really positive that this report's come and it's now been discussed, and it is a complex area that, from our perspective, it's one of the only items that impacts the bottom line in the accounts in terms of usable reserves. For the council and members to be talking about that, it's a really positive outcome. We've now started underway with our audit planning for the 24-25 audit cycle, following completion of the last year end accounts and sign off in early February. We've kept up a good dialogue with James, Rachel and the team since last year, which has been really positive, discussing some of the expected year end adjustments that are going to be made. We intend to draft our audit plan and present that to the next committee, which will be broadly in line with last year's risks we expect, and following up on the key recommendations we made as part of our value for money work. And we've not identified any new emerging risks of which we need to make the committee aware at this stage. We'd also note the broad outline of the timetable for this year-end audit, so we're working towards trying to complete all the work and reporting by the end of the 2025 calendar year, with our reports coming to the January 2026 committee in line with your committee dates as they stand currently. And the latter pages of the report just contain some broad sector updates across the country, but nothing of which we need to make you aware. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Greg. I'll open it to members if there are any questions on this at all. Or are we content to just note the report? Yeah. Thank you. Thanks, Greg. So,
well, that's okay. It wasn't probably one worth saying, but there you are. But thanks very much.
right, thank you, Greg. We will now move on to item 12. I tried to get too early. I think that's Martin.
Thanks, Chair. You've been wanting to get there a while, haven't you? I'm sure you won't when you get it. Sorry that this is 50 pages long. Though a lot of it is sort of a little bit of it is duplicated. So I think I've been talking to you for a while about the fact that the global internal audit standards were taking effect from sometime during 2025, and in the end for public sector UK bodies it was the 1st of April 2025. And these make not an awful lot of change about how internal audit itself functions, but puts a little bit more structure into the oversight and control of it, and actually makes the global internal audit standards much more like the previous public sector UK internal audit standards, slightly bizarrely. The one bit that is newly emphasised, though, is the relationship between internal audit and management, and internal audit and the audit committee, and the audit committee and management, and that is the much more strengthened and codified part of the new standards, to such an extent that they have almost become too big and too deeply controlling for any small organisation, which includes us, to comply. And so there is now a degree of recognition by the Institute of Internal Auditors that what might be appropriate for a large corporate organisation like a UK clearing bank, who might have several hundred people working in their internal audit function, doesn't really work for smaller organisations like local authorities in the UK, or health service bodies in the UK, or indeed smaller companies in the UK. So there is a degree of recognition that absolute compliance isn't practical or even essential for medium-sized bodies, and as you go down and down the size of bodies, for example, down to smaller single-purpose authorities, smaller districts, and other organisations that might choose to have an internal audit function, you essentially can't ignore these. That having been said, I think there is a reasonable expectation from the UK public sector that authorities of our size largely follow the rules and processes of governance set out in the global internal audit standards. And so what I have tried to do is to share with you the documentation that the new global internal audit standards expect, which is that we establish a charter and a mission, and separately a strategy that sets out how internal audit will relate to you and the organisation, and you will relate to the organisation, etc., etc. So that is what is set out in the charter. The subset of that is the mission, which essentially is a little bit of an expectation, mandate, which is a little bit of an expectation that we restate the content of the Council's financial procedure rules, which essentially already give internal audit unfettered access to information in the organisation, etc. The strategy that comes from that is I'm not 100% convinced that it's absolutely necessary, but it's a further document where you essentially say what you are trying to achieve through your internal audit function as a over a 3 or 4 year time horizon. So it's something that is just a short document. That there's no expectation that it's very large, but it deals with things like the training of the audit committee and the training of staff in the internal audit team. All that leads you down the route of establishing from April 2025 some kind of work plan for internal audit, which is the core reason for perhaps bringing this today. So the first parts are about ensuring we comply so that we don't upset our external audit colleagues, and that we actually generate good governance. There is absolutely nothing wrong with what's in the global internal audit standards, but they are just a little bit controlling. But we need those, so I've put those forward for you to adopt, and what's there is a charter and mandate, a demonstration by the track change version of how I've altered that from the mandate and charter version that is put forward by the Institute of Internal Auditors. So if you sort of look at that and think, what the devil's this, why is it full of alterations? Well, I've altered it to make it more practical for your needs, or our needs. And then a short strategy, and then a couple of pages which set out the current areas of audit risk, essentially, a proposed plan for the first half of 2025-26, a second plan which is a draft, essentially, which would deal with the rest of 25-26, so October to March 2026, and then a few standards for operating the internal audit function and for assessing it. And I am proposing to the committee that they increase the number of essentially targets or objectives for internal audit. They're set out on page 129 of the pack that members have got. Because of the fact that we need a little bit more information about how effective you've been, or the organisation's been. So it's about assurance target, the number of the proportion of audits that get a particular level of assurance, and the implementation recommendations. And lots of the things that you've been doing over the last year, which have been slight and subtle changes to practice, are much more congruent with the expectations of what the new standards are. So you have been going in the right direction by the decisions you've been making, like to invite colleagues to come and explain one or two things to you from time to time. So, I'm sorry if that was a bit of a ramble, but hopefully that sort of helped in understanding of where we are going, and I'm happy to take questions or for us to have a discussion about the content of the audit plan, Chair, or anything else you wish. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Martin. I'll open it to members. James?
A couple of things. The first one, Martin, was just in terms of the planning and resourcing. You know, it looks like we're under-resourced, and it sounds like we're trying to recruit people, but we've been unsuccessful, and I'm just a bit sort of concerned about that as to what's happening. Because obviously we've got 3 FTE. If anybody leaves or moves to a new role, we're not going to have a functioning audit. We're not going to have proper audit functions working. So, what steps are we taking there, and what's proving difficult? And if we're finding it difficult to recruit experienced auditors, what are we doing to get someone on are we looking at the wrong place? You know, should we be looking at someone on a graduate program or a training program or something? Because it just concerns me that point that we always have around resourcing.
I think that's an absolute concern. Actually, it's got worse since I wrote this because another member of staff's chosen to leave. And it is becoming very difficult. And despite us, attempting to go through recruitment process, we are not being 100% successful. We're not even managed to encourage colleagues from within our own organisation to apply for roles. And it may be because we are specifying the work in a little bit of a different way. It's been traditionally and historically seen as a role for accountants to want to do, and maybe the answer is some of it doesn't need accountants to do, but some of it undoubtedly does need accountants to do, which might then suggest that there is an issue about something about the way in which we choose to employ people. Again, it's hard to see how we could be more flexible in the sense that it's a mixture of working from home, working flexible hours if you want, working can't work absolutely from home, by the way, but you can do a lot of this. The work planning and lots of the systems are electronically based now, so you don't actually physically have to visit places like you used to have to do this work. So I think it is a very serious problem, and I am very worried about it. And I think it's about understanding how the organisation sees this as a priority, because I note the comments made by earlier about how internal audit can really add value to the organisation if it delivers the sort of things that the organisation wants. So I think we are under-resourced and we need to work out how to do it. We have got one trainee in our own team, though again, his aspirations are, possibly to do accountancy rather than audit as such. And maybe we do have to explore the issue about getting people to want to study pure internal audit. I think one of the difficulties for that is that the actual qualifications are surprisingly hard, and because of the way in which the private sector employs people, you could well finish up training someone who would then immediately leave and get paid twice as much for possibly having less responsibilities, albeit they would have a worse lifestyle because their new international employer might expect them to go to, Germany next week and Scotland the week after. So it's about getting that balance right in people's lifestyles. I think we need to just think, I don't have an absolute answer. One answer is to outsource some or all of the work, but I'm not sure that is an answer. Ultimately, in the best interest of the organisation, it might be in the short-term interest and the short-term want to deliver, but, we clearly have to acknowledge that is something which would be a potential choice. And again, it all depends how much the organisation wants to pay and what it wants to get back, and how much assurance it wants. And at the next meeting, you'll see the results from 24-25. We have not been able to deliver an awful lot of work. You'll have to reach an opinion about how much assurance you think that brings to you. I think we did, however, do a reasonable degree of coverage of a reasonable range of areas, which gives a sort of it has the right breadth of assurance. It's just whether there's enough depth to it, because we are doing enough work. So we haven't been doing enough work. I think that's true to say. We are trying to it. The organisation has, after a little bit of a delay, committed to trying to get new people, but then it's about getting them to come. And maybe we need to think about, additional areas and different ways in which we can incentivise people to want to come. But again, have to recognise that our staffing structure has been historically based around a sort of shared set of priorities with accountancy, and maybe those are moving apart.
Thanks for that, Martin. I think Sam was indicating she wanted to come in.
Yeah, I think Samantha Lawton, I'm the Service Director for Governance and Commissioning. I think I just want to assure you that it is flagged with myself, who manages audit and risk, that one of the things that we're looking to do is to bring in some more specialist HR support. We've done that with legal services, where we've had significant amount of vacancies. We've looked at the way we recruit. We've partnered with some external agencies, and we've seen some success. There are some areas that just nationally you're not seeing a lot of solicitors come through, for example, childcare. But we have been successful in other parts of legal services. So we're at a point now with audit where I think we need to do that specialist work with HR, look at how we recruit. We have made some changes to the job description, so we haven't just been going out on the same ones. So we did shift and amend the focus sheet, I think, on the last time. But I think we are at a point now where we have to probably do a shift and a deeper dive into that recruitment in terms of audit. So I suppose what I want to do is assure you that it is on our radar, and we are doing the work, and we are meeting about it within literally the next week to look at the recruitment about it.
So thanks for that, Sam.
Yeah.
I think we would feel more assured if perhaps HR or yourself could come back to us in June with an update on what progress has been made in terms of addressing that.
Yeah, we can consult we definitely consult with them. Like I said, we've done a similar piece of work with legal services. So my intention is to pick up the same support that we've had to look at the options that we've got for audit as well. But I'm happy to bring something back, and we can bring that back in June. Yeah.
Thank you. I'll come back to the main report now. And Chris, did you want to come in?
What's on resources, really? I suppose my reflection is we had a similar conversation 12 months ago, so I think we as a committee need to reflect on why we haven't challenged this again since, because clearly things haven't improved, and we probably should have kept that on our action list. But I suppose to me, Martin, and I've got a kind of independent view of this because I really generally don't care about the money, can we continue to provide audit work for West Yorkshire Fire and Rescue and Kirklees Active Leisure, given that we can't resource our own audits?
That's an absolutely fair point, and they are paying for it at the moment. And we're in contract with them, I think, for a remaining year, but that is something to think about. The CAL one is, if we're honest, of such a small significance that it doesn't really make much difference, and it's been part of the council's assurance process, so it's sort of 30 days of mainly low-level work. So that brings part of the that is like almost a council client function at a detail level that there isn't in place for anything else. You know, there is client input from the council strategically to deal with CAL at a property and at a strategy level, but at a detailed issue around, you know, are we satisfied that our money's been well spent? We do a little bit of that. I think that is something to think about, and if we can't sort anything out, one of the ways might be to give notice to the fire authority that, you know, we don't wish to continue to provide this. From a point of view of service delivery, if we could get it sort of helps to widen the skill experience and the like, so there is this sort of advantage to doing that, but that's something we need to reflect on as well. Going back to your earlier point about staffing numbers, it's fair to say that had the staff that we had at the beginning of last year all stayed and whatever, we wouldn't have had the position that we have ultimately finished up with. We would have our position was improving, and then one more person who was a fairly effective member of the team left, and then, as I mentioned earlier, that another member of this team has now said they want to leave as well. So, and those are quite important because it makes quite a lot of difference to how much assurance you can get. So yeah, they're all things we need to keep in mind. Yeah.
James?
Yeah, I just had a couple of other points on the work plan. So on April to September, you've got the tenancy allocation down, and I was a bit unsure about that for two reasons. One, because obviously, as we've just discussed, a lot of what they're talking about is delivery in September, so I'm a bit unsure why we would be going back to audit something before even their current action plans are completed, because we know what's going on there. And the second point was, you know, which I was trying to get at earlier, it wasn't to say that we don't like that people are coming and saying, can we have some support from internal audit? But I'm just thinking, you know, when we have such limited resource, I'm kind of more concerned about the areas that say I've got no risks and no actions than I am about the ones that say we've got some problems, we've identified them, can you give us a bit of a helping hand, just see where I'm coming from. So I just question, one, the timing. Why wouldn't it be in the second half of the year, if that's the right terminology, rather than the first, if they've still got actions from the last one that are delivering. And then my other point was just on send. So you've got send in there, and you've put data integrity and information management as the remit. I'm just wanting to understand what that means. I know it then says exact scope to be agreed. It's just that, you know, we had a discussion, for example, at full council earlier this week, where we had someone saying, well, I don't think send is working as it should be, and we had the cabinet member saying, no, that's not quite correct, this is what's happening, and some dispute on that, and we also had some dispute on whether our send function was sort of a leading provision as comparison to others. And I'm not sure what you can look at, but it just did strike me that it might be quite a good area to look at to see whether actually we think things are functioning as, you know, as they should be, what parts of it are to do with resource issues, which are the national problem and provision of specialists and stuff like that. And is there anything that we should be looking at in Kirklees? And I wasn't sure whether that was going to come out of the remit of what you were looking to do in Send. So it was, I don't know whether it may be too early to say, but that was just something that struck me.
If I can answer those in order. I think there's that Janet's report to the committee did set out that there was one part of the original audit about tenancy transfers that wasn't done, and we were asked to sort of expedite that part as well. So that's the bit that's in the existing audit plan. So it's the one bit that wasn't done that's mentioned in Janet's report. However, and I think very much for the reasons that you've all established today, that the time you would particularly like a further feedback report is when CX has been implemented, and you can have a sort of proper, that I think we perhaps need to reflect on. I had originally intended that we would do an independent follow-up of the tenancy audit, but I think given the detailed explanation that's been now provided to you by Janet, which you might say, well, we still want an independent evaluation at some point, because she can say what she can tell you, she gives you the management's perspective. However, I think given their openness and the fact that they are making a lot of system and arrangement changes, it would be wise to terminate the existing task at the point of just doing the little bit that was missing, and then to set aside some time later when I think when a timing that aligns with what we've discussed, which is probably Q4 2025-6, or possibly even Q1 26-27 as the time to actually redo that bit. So I think that that's correct, and I agree with that. As regard to the SEND audit, I think there is also an argument that this is subject to so much internal scrutiny and assessment already that adding what is a very short resource, internal audit resource, into this mix may not necessarily be the most appropriate use of audit time. So that might be something which you would like to direct, or alternatively, you might want to pursue the line that Councillor Homewood has quite reasonably put forward, which is, can internal audit get to the bottom of this? I think the difficulty is it is extremely complicated, and the reasons we may as an organisation have been underperforming, which is recognised in all our risk systems, may well be as a result of a very complex set of arrangements that is proving quite difficult for management to address. So I think that's something that you might want to decide about, whether you want to put that as a priority, or whether you want to say, look, let's leave the organisation to try to make progress without audit intervention at the present time, particularly given our shortage of resources. That I think the latter is my suggestion, that maybe it is something where we would perhaps leave off SEND for the moment, but if you feel that that is a really important area to pursue, then I'm happy to continue to resource it. But increasingly, for the reasons that we've already discussed, I'm having to say it would be ideal if we had the resource to look into some of these things, but we can't really justify it, and we're having to do things by substitute methods, which give us some degree of assurance. But I was talking to colleagues.
Thanks, Matt. I'll bring James back in.
I was just going to say this is where it might be useful if the chair of overview scrutiny was here, just because I don't know about the level of scrutiny that is occurring on SEND, because I'm not on that panel or internally as well. Because I think maybe it's worth liaising with the scrutiny panel to see if they feel that they're already doing that level of scrutiny. I just don't know the answer to that. I'm just kind of conscious that it's an issue that's coming up a lot, and I'd like to make sure we're assured that we've got the right processes and the right actions in place.
I'll take an action to talk to the chair of the Children's Scrutiny Panel about how involved they are. Just on the plan, Martin, one thing just to think about is there's been quite a lot of change in adults and children's on the back of saving proposals. Perhaps at some point we need to go back and look at some of these to make sure that, A, that they're delivering, but also have there been any consequential impacts as a result of some of those fundamental changes. That's probably something just to think about.
Yeah, I think that's a very valid point, Chair. There is an audit of the topic of the implementation of savings that is in the audit plan somewhere. I'm just having a quick look for it, because I know the Chief Finance Officer asked for it to be included, and I won't be able to find it now. Well, yes, there it is. Finance budget viabilities. So that is in the plan, but it's in the plan of the context of can we achieve the budget savings. I think, as you rightly say, there is a second the mirror half of that, which is what impacts does that have, or are there any unexpected or unintended consequences? So we can probably add that into the scope of that piece of work, Chair. Yeah.
Kath?
Yeah, just on the plan, in the peer report it talked about or suggested that the council should have, now I'm quoting that, I probably got it wrong, an aggressive approach to asset sales. And it does seem to me that there is a risk in that for the council, perhaps not getting value for money in if you sell too quickly. So I wondered whether that ought to be the subject of an internal audit, because a lot is at stake. That's without any, I just think we ought to perhaps think about doing an audit of it, that's all. Then the other, my constant concern about what audit is done of non-community schools? Is it none?
No.
Who does that audit?
So under the schools legislation that applies to academies, academy trusts are trusted, unlike local authorities, to appoint their own external auditors, and there are firms that are in the business of auditing academy schools. There is also a requirement for academy schools to have a sort of nominal internal audit function that's often delivered by their own staff, but is sometimes delivered by an outside contractor. It's fairly low level. One or two internal audit teams do seek to deliver that to academy schools in their area, but it has more reporting than it has content, so we've always taken the view that it was not viable to do as a sort of process.
I'll investigate further elsewhere. So then the other point, what is on the whatever page it is, your proposed audit plan April to September, you've got a request from the CFO, which you've just referenced, about budget viabilities. And I just thought that was a bit strange, really, to be honest, that we've agreed a budget that the CFO is querying or wanting an audit of its viability. I would have thought that would have come before we agreed the budget, that's all.
I think that's perhaps a concern. I mean, the CFO, as you know, is relatively new, so I think it's a concern that he has held for a little while, but he did sort of re-ask for us to put that in the plan. It might well be that we reach the conclusion that the arrangements that accountancy colleagues now have in place are quite suitable for this purpose, right. But I think certainly there has been concerns about things that have been put in past budgets, which, with the benefit of hindsight, were possibly not very achievable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I understand. Then there was one other, but NDR, including the relief, because as you will know, that's all changed and will be complex for a retail, hospitality, leisure businesses who will lose approximately half their COVID relief this April, and the remainder next April, but will have a lower multiplier. So good luck with that, is all I'm going to say, because that is going to be very complicated. And I'm just hoping that what the reason for the comment and question is that it is complicated, and therefore understanding the amount of time that you might have to set aside for doing it.
Yeah, I think that's a fair comment, Chair. And Kirklees has an unusually large number of business rate clients, which especially for small units. So we don't have large numbers of the really big warehouses and office blocks and things that you find in cities like Leeds and
Oh, yeah,
Wakefield.
they're going to pay
So-
more. I mean, yeah.
So it does mean that Kirklees particularly is vulnerable to that. We will have to hope that the IT updates and systems, but that's part of the audit to be sure that the system is, adjusting and making adjustments correctly in accordance with the regulation.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm checking the next agenda item. Is there anybody else? Chris?
So a couple of things, Martin. Firstly, on the charter, I'm fine with that. I think I'm also, for the record, quite happy that you've got some other wider responsibilities and the mitigations work, and I think it's worth the committee noting that and accepting it formally. I read that we're responsible for reviewing your performance. I'm not sure when and how we've ever done that in the past, but was that a new item in the charter or something that we've just missed?
It's sort of always been in there. I think the issue about how you do it and whether it actually absolutely applies in the UK public sector is a sort of issue. If you as a committee have concerns about the performance of the internal auditing on those two things are some respects different, but they could be the same as well. We would like to have I suppose you could have a great auditing and internal auditing if it's not very good. And equally in reverse, you could have an internal auditing if it's very good, physical auditing is small. Sorry, got them. So I guess you're right. So I think it would be that if you feel that you want in your conversations in private to relate things that those should be done to the chair, and then the chair should perhaps make those to my own supervisor. I think that's the way that you would expect it to be done, which is Mrs. Lawton.
So as long as it's agreed, it's a kind of informal process rather than we do, because I think other people must do annual formal processes, and that's not for us. So on the plan, I think I quite like the idea of budget viabilities being on the programme. I'd quite like to see it extended into kind of in-year budget management as well, because I think obviously, the council sadly has a history of overspending year after year after year after year, mitigated by some clever techniques, but still overspending in reality. So I think it's not enough just to look at whether the budget was okay when it was set, but has it been properly managed? So I would like to see that extended if it's possible. I think I'm pleased to see capital assurance arrangements in the programme. I'm not sure what it means, because it seems to me the council's capital programme is one of its major financial risks. I make no comment on the policy, it's just about how it's been implemented, isn't it really? So perhaps you could tell us a bit on what that's meant, because it is a management request. And finally, I think in the past we've been happy and very happy to delegate to you changes in the programme as things unfold. I think given the uncertainty about resources, it might be in your interests because presumably this plan is based on having a full team, ish. And if so I guess the question is, keep us up to date on things that you can't deliver rather than wait till the end of the 6-month period or the end of the year to tell us, because it's possible this year you won't be able to deliver quite a lot, I guess, depending on how the recruitment goes.
Yeah, I think there's about 50 audits in this programme, apart from schools. And yeah, given how many we achieved last year and the fact that we're going into the year with a slightly lower than a sound number of staff, then yes, that is an issue. And I think we need to keep monitoring that as we go through the year. This is how many we've achieved, because we should be getting around about a dozen pieces of work in each quarter, apart from schools. And I think we've been getting around 8, 9. So let's monitor that through the year. As regards the capital assurance, I think interestingly enough, there's a bit of work that's been taking place by a member of my own team, but on a sort of consultancy basis, which is looking to put some increased capital assurance in place. I think is planned to go forward to cabinet ultimately into it. So it may be that we decide that we've had an input into that in a sort of a consultancy capacity, and again, recognising that as a consultancy capacity, recognising that some of the things we've mentioned earlier about send and that sort of thing, is that in a consultancy capacity? It's important under the global internal audit standards that we keep separate the issue of assurance and consultancy, because some of it's the consultancy part So the assurance part is about giving you assurance that the likelihood is that outcomes are going to be achieved. The consultative part is sort of almost helping the organisation to get there separately. So it might well be that we reach the conclusion that that there isn't any point in auditing the capital assurance stuff because we've actually contributed into helping to improve the governance of it. So we maybe just need to watch that, or it may be that we record that as a consultancy piece that we have done in our early part of the year. But again, I'm without going on too much, Chair, just to remind everyone that you need to be assured that we've got enough assurance work in the plan, particularly, and should almost be saying to me, Martin, you shouldn't be doing assurance work if you can't. Sorry, you shouldn't be doing consultancy work if you can't staff your assurance work.
Chris. So I think in other organisations, I'm sure not this one, you can avoid audit scrutiny by asking for consultancy work. So I think when management asks for a piece of work, it should always be a piece of audit work, and the recommendation should help management improve. I don't quite buy into the idea of auditors doing consultancy. I think you should always do a piece of audit work, tell management what's not working and help them improve it. And then you can give us the assurance or not and still help the organisation improve. I think that's a false split. So I would urge you to avoid consultancy work and stick to audit, particularly given the lack of resources and the scale of the programme. I think all audit work should be helpful to management, shouldn't it?
Yeah, fine. Well, we can. I mean, that's about giving. Ultimately, it's about getting to a point about an opinion. So it's about how we work to the point of. You almost say our opinion before we do any advice about the sort of things you might do is that this isn't very good, which I think we could probably reach as a conclusion about some of the capital because of the fact that there's an unstructured structure, if that's the right word. If you can have such a thing, which is that we have a capital plan that that's unsustainable. We can't afford to do. I've been here 40 years and we've always had a capital plan that's been bigger than what we could afford. But it's just that the difference between its size and and what we can afford has got bigger and bigger and bigger. The difference has got bigger and bigger and bigger. And I think that what our new CFO wants to do is to bring those so that they're rather closer together, which has an awful lot of sense and logic to it.
Right. I think we're endangered on some of this in getting into line management, because I think the actual line management of what you do and any concerns you have about capacity and things would be something that you discuss with your line manager, isn't it? Rather than perhaps, and that's an ongoing discussion through the year, isn't it? Whereas we'll get a quarterly report, won't we, in terms of what progress has been made. So I think that there is an element of this that we need to be careful that we don't step into trying to line manage what you do. That's a responsibility, well, clearly for Sam to pick up. Has anyone any other questions or comments they want to make on either the charter or the plan? There were some recommendations in the report, so I'll nick this and read them. So the recommendations are that the internal audit charter and audit strategy be approved, noting that the areas where the council's arrangements might be assessed as not fully compliant, that the proposed audit plan for 2025-26, April to September, and the draft for October to March be approved, that the committee notes the resourcing permission, and we've already asked for a report to come back in June on that, and also that the head of risk and internal audit be delegated authority to make the changes to the audit plan as he considers reasonable, reflecting on the needs of the organisation, subject to this being reported back to the committee, which we get on a quarterly basis. Are we content with accepting those recommendations as a committee? Yep. Okay. Thank you very much, Martin. We now are just waiting for Terence from IT to come and give us the cybersecurity private update. So if members just want to... Oh.
It's on the agenda.
Sorry. I'm doing really well today trying to miss agenda items, aren't I? So the last item on the agenda is the audit plan, but given this is the agenda plan, given this is our last meeting of the year, there's nothing new or further to add on that. I don't know if anybody has any comments on it at all. We're just noting that. Okay. Whilst waiting for Terence to arrive, if people want to take a quick comfort break. But thank you, officers, if you're leaving or staying. Thank you. And I think we should formally thank Carol for coming as well. As you know, it's nice to see the leader of the council turning up. Okay, thank you. I think we're closing the formal bit of the meeting now.